So, after the Minnesota game on Saturday, I realized that we are way overdue to have a long talk about the defense and goaltending for the Kraken to start off this season. Now, unfortunately, I didn't think about it until after I'd already finished recording that video, but I figured we'd probably have a good chance after the Colorado game to talk about it then, as even with McKinnon missing, that's probably going to be a hard game for the Kraken to win. Plus, with the only game between those two being this one against Chicago, I mean, that's probably going to end up being a win, right? So we'll celebrate the win, and then we can talk about the frustrations with the defense after the probable loss to the Avalanche. But looks like we're talking about it this time. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken have now lost 5 straight, falling tonight to the Chicago Blackhawks 4-2. And for those of you who like to look at things glass half full, at least this is the first time in franchise history that they've lost 5 straight games. On the other hand, it is also just the 16th game they've ever played. Now, this R&R is going to look a little different. We'll still talk about the game real quick, but like I said in the open, we are way overdue to have a longer conversation about the defense and goaltending struggles from the Kraken early on this season. And getting into the game itself, that goaltending was kind of the spotlight coming into this one. And that's because with Philip Grubauer in goal for Seattle and Marc-Andre Fleury in goal for Chicago, we were set to see a matchup between 2 of the 3 Vezina finalists from last season, including the winner, and also the 2 of the 3 who found their way to new teams in the offseason with no return to their old ones. Though, to be fair, the real story probably had a little bit more to do with the fact that although both of these guys did have fantastic seasons last year, this season, at least early on, yeah, not so much. But we will be getting to that later on. Coming into this game for the Kraken, there were also a couple of other changes in the lineup, or at least small tweaks, as Gord and Tanev were reunited back on the same line together, with Blackwell alongside them on the third line. Well, we also got to see the return of Hayden Fleury to the lineup, which is something that we talked about wanting to see a couple of games ago. And while he didn't have a fantastic night by any means, it still was nice to see him back in the lineup. Getting into the game itself, we're pretty much just going to skip right past the first period because, well, the Kraken decided to themselves. Overall, it was an incredibly sloppy period, really from both teams, but especially from the Kraken, as they allowed a number of odd man breakaways for Chicago and had a couple of bad defensive zone turnovers, most of which Grubauer was able to bail them out of, but one that featured an odd man break for Kane, DeBrincat, and Jones did manage to find the back of the net, and we got to the first intermission with the Kraken down 1-0, though it definitely could have been worse than that. Seattle actually gets off to a pretty decent start right out of the gates in the second period, finally looking like they've actually woken up and are ready to play this game. Why on earth it took them an entire period to get to the point where they're willing to show signs of life after 3 days rest is completely beyond me, but better late than never. Of course, no sooner could you form that thought and start to feel decent about the Kraken's chances of coming back from a 1-0 deficit going forward with 2 periods left. Then they get caught sleeping once again on defense, and it's DeBrincat on a partial breakaway. He is able to beat Grubauer, and it's 2-0 Blackhawks 2 minutes into the second period. Now, DeBrincat is a very good player and absolutely not the person that you want to see on a partial breakaway shooting on your goaltender. Even still, this is one that Grubauer probably has to come up with a save on, especially with the way that Fleury was playing on the other end, as we were about to see for the remainder of this second period. It would not take us long at all to see an example of that out of Fleury, as quickly off of the faceoff, the Kraken have a chance to respond when Eberle has an incredibly pretty pass to Gord in front of the net, who takes the shot, but Fleury makes an even more incredible save to keep the Kraken off of the board and maintain that 2-goal lead for Chicago. Then another bad defensive zone turnover, this time from Chicago, leads to a chance for Johansson, and this is saved too, as well as another attempt off of the rebound. A few minutes later, it's more pressure and shots off on net for the Kraken, including a nice scoring chance for Gord, who gets a pass from deep in the Kraken zone while Chicago's on a change, but he can't get this one to go in either. Of course, who did that pass come from? Philip Grubauer of all people. By the end of the period, a Kraken team who only had 3 shots off on goal in the first has 16 in the second, absolutely dominating the second period in every single way, except for on the scoreboard where for the second period in a row, it's 1-0 Chicago, now for a total of 2-0. Where have I heard that story before? Early in the third, Tanev is tripped from behind and goes down hard and is slow to get up. Fortunately, he is able to get up and does play the rest of this game, and the Kraken get on the power play. Nope, just kidding, the Kraken don't go on the power play because there's no call whatsoever. And for any of you newer fans who are watching this and are confused as to how that isn't a tripping call, I have no answers for you at all. This absolutely should have been tripping, and I guess the best I can say is you're not the only ones who are confused. Seconds later though, the refs are willing to call reffing on Dunn. Now, he absolutely earned the call, but after the blatantly missed call on Tanev, it just doesn't really sit right. Fortunately, the best chance scoring-wise to come out of this power play for the Blackhawks is for Gord on the other end. Fleury is able to make the save, and then after that, Gord gets into another little tussle with the Blackhawks, which ends up leading to a roughing call on Jones, and then Gord finds himself in a fight with DeBrincat, who completes the Gordie Howe hat trick. And yes, of course, throughout this entire fight, Gord does have that massive Joker grin all the way across his face, so at least he's enjoying himself. So after all of that, we go to 4-on-4 for 30 seconds, which doesn't really go anywhere, then a Kraken power play for a minute and a half, which also, of course, doesn't really go anywhere. And then right after the power play ends for the Kraken, somehow Patrick Kane of all people gets completely lost in the defense and gets a free shot off on goal and is able to beat Grubauer to make it 3-0 Blackhawks. And while you can say that this is one you'd also maybe like to see Grubauer have, it's also true that you probably don't want to leave Patrick Kane of all people wide open to take a shot. Eventually, about halfway through the third period, the Kraken are finally able to show at least some kind of urgency and get back that momentum that they had for the majority of the second period, continuing to get pressure and shots off on goal, but still can't get anything past Fleury, right up until they get on the power play, and after wasting the first minute to minute and a half of it, a couple of prime chances in front of the net, the first one saved by Seth Jones. The second one does find the back of the net from McCann. It's a second power play goal for the Kraken in a pretty short span, so at least there's some good news. But while they do get on the board, it's still a 3-1 deficit for the Kraken with just about 7 minutes left in the game. Then, coming off of this first goal for the Kraken, it's back to more of the same from before the penalty with pressure from Seattle, shots off on net, and Marc-Andre Fleury showing why he won the Vezina last year. Eventually, the Kraken do end up pulling Grubauer with about 3.5 minutes left in the game, so at least a reasonable time to pull a goaltender. They actually even wait until they have control and possession in the offensive zone. Because they waited and were patient to pick the right time, it ends up leading to a goal as Dunn makes a pass for a one-timer from Gord, which finds the top corner and into the back of the net, and suddenly, with just under 2 minutes left, there seems like there might be a chance that the Kraken could pull off the crazy 3-goal comeback in the third period. But with 30 seconds left, a poor decision entering the offensive zone gets the puck onto McCabe's stick, and he rainbows the puck over everyone and into the empty net. Chicago ends up winning this one 4-2. Okay, time to talk about the defense. I don't think it's going too far to say that a 4-11-1 start is disappointing, even if you weren't one of the people who were on the more optimistic end and thinking that the Kraken coming into the season had a decent shot at making the playoffs. So who then is to blame for this slow start that the Kraken have gotten off to? And I say slow like it's anything other than absolutely sluggish. Well, as we've seen, the main person that people seem to want to use as a scapegoat and pile all the blame onto for this slow start for the Kraken is of course the goaltender in Philip Grubauer. And to some extent that's only natural, much like with a quarterback in football. If a team's not playing particularly well, that's usually the shoulders that the blame is going to fall on first. It doesn't matter if the quarterback threw 3 interceptions that saw 2 of them bounce off of receivers' hands and the other one because the receiver quit on a route. At the end of the day, those are still 3 interceptions that go on the quarterback's record, and to most fans, he's going to be the one to blame. And for Grubauer, when it comes to stats, let's just say those really don't help him out a lot, and for people that want to blame him, they definitely help them out quite a bit. I mean, if you look at goals saved above expected so far this season, Grubauer is in dead last among all goaltenders with a negative 12.3. Oh, and look, there's Marc-Andre Fleury with a negative 7.7. Of course, this was from before tonight's game, so those are going to have gone in opposite directions, and for Grubauer, it's probably going to look even worse than that. But if you've decided that Grubauer's your GOAT, and I don't mean the good kind, I mean lowercase bad kind of GOAT, then you don't even need these fancy, more advanced stats. All you need is good old save percentage, where Grubauer, once again, among all goaltenders so far this season, is second to last behind just one guy who's played 2 games. So as far as goaltenders with significant playing time, he might as well be dead last. And again, yes, this is from before tonight's game, but after it still doesn't fall below Dawes, as he just falls 3 points to an 877, which is still absolutely awful. But at least to me, as someone who's watched every minute of every game so far, I think these numbers are somewhat misleading and unfair to Grubauer to a certain extent. Ultimately, I don't even think he's the biggest problem so far to this point this season. Now, that having been said, he absolutely is a part of the problem and has played nowhere near what we expected of him coming into the year, but I think that the defense actually has played more of a role in where the Kraken have ended up to this point. Now, there's no way around the fact that those truly horrendous stats that we just looked at do belong to Philip Grubauer and do go on his record going forward. But with goalie stats, a large portion of what goes into them has as much to do with the defense as it does with the goaltender himself. I mean, just take save percentage, for example. All save percentage is what percentage of the shots on goal did the goaltender save. It doesn't care if those shots came from the top corner by the blue line from a guy who was getting checked as he was shooting it, or if they came from the best 3 players on the opposing team, coming at the net, passing the puck back and forth across the goaltender's face. Now, obviously, one of those situations has a much better chance of turning into a goal, regardless of who the goaltender is, but as far as save percentage is concerned, each shot is the same. And to the credit of the Kraken defense, they've actually been pretty good at limiting the number of shots that opposing teams are getting, having one of the lowest average shots against per game in the entire league. The problem is that the shots that they're limiting are much more those lower danger ones, while a high percentage of the chances that they're allowing are those odd man breakaway, higher danger situations. Now, those of you who have the lowercase GOAT stamped across Grubauer's forehead, I hear you saying that that's what advanced stats are for, and when it comes to low, medium, and high danger shots, Grubauer has a very bad save percentage on all of those. So how do you explain that? So here's the thing with expected goals, and before I get too deep into this, again, I want to stress that I'm not trying to defend Grubauer as an above average goaltender so far to this point this season. All I'm trying to say is that he has not been the worst, or really even one of the few worst goaltenders in the league, like these stats are saying he has been. With expected goals, which again is what all of these stats are based on, while it does account for the danger of different shots and how likely they are to turn into goals. So with our previous example, the one that's a contested shot up in the corner of the offensive zone would get a pretty low score, while the one that is a passing play in front of the net would be a much higher danger chance. It does make it a better stat than, say, save percentage, for example. What it doesn't account for is how contested a shot is. Because although it does vary from site to site how they calculate expected goals and how dangerous different shots are, for most places, all that really goes into it is where on the ice the shot was taken from, what angle from the net it's taken at, and how far away. Now with MoneyPuck specifically, which is the site that has Grubauer in dead last with goals saved above expected, they do add quite a bit more into their expected goal calculation, which to me does make it a little bit better of a stat than some other places. That having been said, the one thing that is still missing from this one, that is missing from just about all expected goal stats, is how contested a shot is, which means that it especially has a really hard time compensating for shots that come off of odd man rushes, which often are either a completely wide open shot or an open shot off of a pass. And for the Kraken, that is certainly a problem, as well, with most teams, they're going to give and take their odd man rushes here and there. For Seattle, they have been giving up way too many odd man rushes, with seemingly 5 to 10 each game. So using this game as an example, these stats have no way of knowing that with the first goal, it was a 3-on-2 that had 2 passes going across Grubauer's face, only one of which had even a chance of being defended, much less that those 3 players for Chicago amount to $17.5 million of their payroll, and that's just this season before Seth Jones' contract rolls over next year, at which point it will be 21.5 million, otherwise known as more than a quarter of their salary cap. Definitely not the 3 guys you want to allow on an odd man breakaway. They have no way of calculating for the fact that on the second goal, a defensive breakdown by Seattle allowed DeBrincat, one of the Blackhawks' best scorers, to get on a partial breakaway, whose shot was only slightly contested by Alexiak, close to the net. All it cares is that the shot was close to the net. And finally, although the expected goal stat and all the stats that rely on it are some of the best stats that we currently have available to us in the game of hockey, they have no way of knowing that with the third goal in this game, the Kraken were going to completely forget about the existence of Patrick Kane, probably the best player in the history of one of the original 6 franchises, and leave him wide open to take a shot on Grubauer, which of course he scores on. As far as these stats are concerned, that could have been just about any player on the Blackhawks team, and there could have been 2 defenders between him and the goaltender. Now, yes, you could say that the Kraken got a couple of odd man breakaways of their own in this game, and none of those led to goals, but that has a lot more to do with the fact that the Kraken on their odd man chances decided to pass the puck too many times instead of shooting it, which is its own problem that we might get to down the road. And sure, you could also say that it's just one game, but I think we all know that when it comes to these defensive breakdowns and odd man chances they keep allowing, this has not been just one game. I mean, just the game that I was talking about being the one where I thought about this, in the Minnesota one, the 3 goals in that game were 2 completely free breakaways and 1 2-on-1. So again, Grubauer in 3 situations that he really shouldn't be in that frequently. Now, finally, again, I will say that Grubauer does have to come up with, on his end, more saves on more of these odd man dangerous chances that the Kraken defense is allowing than he has up till this point. We already talked about the fact that the DeBrincat goal, he probably should have come up with a save on that one, and even outside of the odd man chances that have happened, he has been allowing a few soft goals here and there that there is no excuse for. So I'm not trying to make the argument that he's been a lights out goaltender or what we expected. All I'm saying is he has not been as bad as people are trying to make you believe that he has. And at the end of the day, especially today, I think for all of us Kraken fans, what this ultimately boils down to is that we're all just incredibly frustrated, whether it's Grubauer or the defense, that what was supposed to be the 2 strengths of this team so far have been the 2 weakest points of it, even with a defensively minded head coach, which, again, is another person that you could potentially point the blame at. But as always, I'd also love to know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Am I on the right track here, or do you think that I'm totally out of my mind and that this is all Grubauer's fault? Either way, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for sticking with me through that rant for one thing, and for making it to this point in the video. If you did like or enjoy it, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help out the channel, so I would appreciate you using them. Otherwise, until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, which includes Grubauer, and go Kraken.